Sin, cos and tan, example 2. Work out the value of angle A. So we have a right angle triangle, and we have angle A, and then we have sides measuring 12 units, 5 units, and 13 units. So when we have a right angle triangle, we can either use Pythagoras' theorem or SOHCAHTOA. Pythagoras' theorem is to be used when you've got two sides and you need to find a third. In this case, we know all three sides, so there'd be no reason to use Pythagoras' theorem here. So we're going to use SOHCAHTOA, and that's because there's an angle involved. So SOHCAHTOA can only be used with a right angle triangle, and this is a right angle triangle, and we're trying to find an unknown angle, so we can use SOHCAHTOA. So we're going to write out our formula SOHCAHTOA. Then we label our triangle. So the hypotenuse is the longest side, so that's 13. The opposite is always opposite the angle. So there's angle A, so that must be opposite, so 5 is the opposite. And the third side is adjacent to the angle, so that's the 12. So since we have all three sides, we can use SOH, CA, or TOA. However, let's say we didn't have the opposite, and we only had the hypotenuse and the adjacent, we would have to use CA because we'd have the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Let's say we didn't have the adjacent and we only had the opposite and the hypotenuse, we would have to use SOH. And let's say we didn't have the hypotenuse and we only had the opposite and the adjacent, we would have to use TOA. But because we have all three sides, we can use either SOH, CA, or TOA. So I'm going to do it with all three, and we should get the same answer each time. So I'll start with SOH. So SOH stands for sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite is 5, the hypotenuse is 13. So sine A, so the angle is called angle A, sine A is equal to 5 over 13. And the rule is when we don't know the angle, we have to use the inverse. So sine to the power of minus 1, so that really means the inverse function of sine. And a bracket will open in your calculator when you do that. So you press shift in your calculator and then sine, and a bracket will open. Press the fraction button, put in 5 over 13, close the bracket and equals. So when we don't know the angle, we use the inverse. So we press shift and sine to the power of minus 1 should come up. And you should get 22.6198. It's enough to just write down 4 decimal places. They didn't ask us specifically what they wanted us to round it off to. So I'm going to go with 1 decimal place. So 22.6198 rounds off to 22.6 degrees. So the digit after the 6, the 1, is telling the 6 to rest. So 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. Next, I'm going to use CA. And CA stands for cos equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent is 12. The hypotenuse is 13, so it's going to be cos A equals 12 over 13. So cos A equals 12 over 13. Again, I don't know the angle, so I have to use the inverse. So press shift, cos, a bracket will open, you press the fraction button, 12 over 13, and close the bracket. And you should get the same answer, so it rounds off to be the same answer, 22.6 degrees, which is what we expected. So finally, we'll use TOA. So TOA stands for tan equals opposite over adjacent. So the opposite is 5 and the adjacent is 12. So it's going to be tan A equals 5 over 12. And again, we don't know the angle, so we have to use the inverse. So you're going to press shift and tan. And you should get tan to the power of minus 1 and a bracket will open. You press the fraction button, input 5 over 12, close the bracket and press equals. And again, you get the same answer and we round it off to 22.6 degrees. So in this question, we were given all three sides. So we had the opposite, we had the hypotenuse, and we had the adjacent. So we could pick to use either SOH, CA, or TOA. In the next example, you'll see we're only given two sides. So we have to be very careful with which ratio we choose. So example 3, work out the value of angle A. So here we have angle A, and we have the hypotenuse, which is 10. This side here is opposite the angle, so this is known as the opposite, so we don't have the opposite. and we do have the adjacent. So we have the h, the hypotenuse, and we have the a, the adjacent. So of Sa, Ka, and Toa, which one has a and h, adjacent and hypotenuse, a and h? And it is Ka. So we have to use Ka. We can't use Sa and we can't use Toa. We can only use Ka. So we have the adjacent and we have the hypotenuse. Just to note at this point, if you did want to find that third side, you would just use Pythagoras' theorem, and then you could use Sa, Ka, or Toa. So we're going to use Ka, and Ka is cos equals a over h. So it's going to be cos a equals 8 over 10. So a is 8 and h is 10. Again, we don't know the angle, so we have to use the inverse. So you press shift and cos. So you get cos to the power minus 1 and a bracket. You press the fraction button, input 8 over 10 and close the bracket. And you should get 36.8698, which rounds off to 36.9 degrees. So again, they're not telling you what to round it off to, so I'm choosing one decimal place. So the 6 here is telling the 8 to round up. 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. Example 4. Work out the value of angle A. So we have angle A, and we know the hypotenuse is 29, that's the longest side, and the opposite is 20, but we do not know the adjacent. So we have the O and the H. So we have to choose carefully. Are we going to use Sa, Ka, or Toa? So we're going to go with Sa because we have the O and the H. We can't use Ka because we don't have the adjacent. It's unknown. And we can't use Toa because we don't have the adjacent. But again, if you wanted to, you could use Pythagoras' theorem to find the adjacent, and then you could use Sa, Ka, or Toa. So I've labelled the 29 as the hypotenuse, and I've labelled the 20 as the opposite. So I have the O and the H, so we're going to go with Sa. So sine is equal to O over H. So sine A is equal to 20 over 29. So 20, the opposite, over 29, the hypotenuse. So when we do not know the angle, we must use the inverse. So you press shift and sine to the power minus 1 will come up on your calculator, and a bracket. You input 20 over 29 and close the bracket and equals. Again, just a reminder, make sure you're in degree mode. So you'll get 43.6028. We're not told what to round it off to, so I'm going to choose myself, and I'm going to round it off to 43.6 degrees. So I'm choosing one decimal place. So the 0 tells the 6 to rest. 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest.